I was fairly certain I was going to win.
Welcome to A Piece of the Action. I'm Micah.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Greg.
And we have been giving our takes on some of the most voted on games, according to boardgamegeek.com. These are games that, for better or worse, left enough people with a strong opinion about them that they wanted to vote on them. And last time we reviewed really an enduring classic, Catan, a game that's been around in one form or another since the 70s. This week, we jump forward a few decades to look at another game that is also very much considered to be a classic, and that is Carcassonne. Am I pronouncing that right, guys?
Hey, I think you got that one right.
Carcassonne?
Well, that's the classic interpretation.
Okay, great.
Of it.
So, so Carcassonne.
That's when you lose, you commit Carcassonne.
Carcassonne.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the French version. So, came out in the year 2000, and kind of like Catan, also sort of a German-style family game. And I believe, Greg, you were telling me that we needed to specify here, right? Because there are actually a couple of different versions. Is that right?
Yeah, so the base game is, well, what they put into the base game box has kind of changed through the years. And I think we're just playing the original version of it. Because the River is an expansion that they just kind of started putting into the box. And the newest version of Carcassonne actually takes a piece of the original rules, the farmers, and actually separates it and considers it a variant now, which we kept the farmers in. So we're playing with the farmers, but without the river. And the newest one even has like a little mini expansion with it, like the Abbot, which we did not play with. So this version that we're reviewing is the original base game with the farmers.
Classic.
No river. Yeah, no river expansion, none of the Abbot
If
stuff.
you're 30 to 40 years old and you
right.
play Carcassonne, this is probably the version you played.
All right. So let's talk about it then. Now, I remember from last time when I couldn't remember whether I'd played Catan, and you told me, which I did not remember, that we had played this at Mox together. So I have played this game with Greg in the past. The fact that I can't remember it certainly is not an indictment against the game.
It doesn't speak to, trust me, people at home. That does not speak to anything.
It does not speak to, it could be absolutely the best game in the world. It does not mean that I would be able to remember it.
Do you remember who you played with? Do you remember what you ate that night?
I remember that it was with you because you were the one who reminded me. You were the one who remembered. See, so that's what it is I use your memory instead of my own to keep track of
efficient that way.
Right. So because I think both of you guys have played this before as well. So going into this game, what are your thoughts, or maybe the first time that you played it? What impressions did you guys have, or would one have going into Carcassonne? What do you think? Maybe Eric, you want to start out?
When I first got this game, I really enjoyed it at first. It's a small box. It sets up super quick, plays really easily. It was fun to introduce it to people. I remember when I first picked this up probably 15 years ago, it got a lot of play.
Okay, good. Greg?
I don't have strong memories of this. I don't think I've played this as much as I played Catan. I remember it being like this was considered the next game after Catan for a while back in the days. But I think I've probably played this less than Eric has. But it's just a game that's kind of always been around in my mind.
Right. Yeah, it is certainly a game much like Catan that I definitely do. And all joking aside, although I can't remember the specifics of it, I definitely know the name. It's one of those ones I think that if you start getting into board games, one of the ones that you'll hear the name floating around fairly quickly.
It's after Catan. It's the next thing you're gonna hear.
Right.
And it's lighter than Catan in some ways. I think. It's a bit
think
lighter.
So?
Yeah, I think it's light. I think it's easier to learn than Catan.
It is. It definitely is.
Okay. So then, unlike Settlers of Catan, where just by the title there was some clue as to sort of what you were doing, you were settling something. Looking at the game Carcassonne, other than the idea that it's probably vaguely French in some sense, I have no idea what this game would be about, how it presents itself, what the theme of it is. So what is it that you're doing when you're playing Carcassonne, ostensibly there? Eric?
You're building the city of Carcassonne.
Okay, so it's a city.
Yeah, it's a city building game is basically what you're trying to do.
Or multiple cities, really.
Multiple
You're building
cities.
the region of Carcassonne.
Yeah.
But who you represent in this game, I can't quite figure out, because you make points off of like the robbers on the road, but you also make points off of the knights and the farmers. So I think you're probably like some corrupt governor of some sort. That's the best I can picture it. I have no idea.
That's pretty deep
who
for you, Greg.
And so then what were your impressions, I guess, as far as that theme goes, as you played through the game? Did it accomplish it well? Did you get this? Did you come away with that sense of being some sort of a city planner or whatever it is it's trying to go for, or how did it hold up across all of its different pieces like that?
If I may, I think it basically has as much grasp on a theme as Catan does. I think you don't really get the sense that you're building a city.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's what you're after, it's an entertaining activity. It's a puzzle, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not. You're definitely not feeling like, other than the art on the tiles, you're not getting any kind of theme out of it.
I would say there's even less theme than Catan. Like Catan, you can kind of see, hey, we're settlers and we're kind of building out our culture here. But Carcassonne, I never even remotely think about the theme. It's abstract for the most part.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you said, is it tile placement? Is that the sort of the core thing, or?
Yeah, it goes back and forth. You take turns placing a tile and then deciding if you want to place one of your workers or a meeple down. And where you place that meeple on the tile, you can only place it on the tile that you just put down.
Mm-hmm.
You determine the orientation of the tile when you place it. Some placements are illegal, so you're locked out of certain positions. But when you place a tile, you then decide if you want to play a worker in a city, in a field, or on a road.
Mm-hmm.
And those are your three options. That's it. So
Okay.
those are the rules to the game, basically.
There's four. Is there
another? Oh, yes, the abbot. Or
the cathedral or
cathedral, yeah.
Church, whatever it is.
Those don't come up very often. There's very few of them. But they are the most powerful tiles in the game.
Okay. So it sounds like then if I'm walking through board game store and I pick this game up, the reason why I'm going to decide that I want to take this game home is because it's sort of a fairly lightweight, abstract, puzzle-ish game. Am I understanding the vibe correctly?
Greg?
I think nowadays it would get picked up by name recognition.
Okay.
I'm not sure if a random person who's never heard of Carcassonne would look at the box Carcassonne and think, "Oh, this looks amazing. I want to play this game." It would get lost in all the other Euro games out there.
There wasn't enough at the time when it came out to swamp it, and so I think it got a hold on the market. Not to say it's not a good game. I think it's a pretty good game.
Yeah. Well, so all right. So that would bring me to the same question I asked last week about Catan. Then is how much of its success is just because of it having a long-standing brand recognition where people know it. In other words, if it came out in today's market, would it get the same level of recognition? Let's say maybe they spruce up the box, they change the name of it to something catchier, or something like that. But does the game itself hold up enough, or is it essentially just cruising on its reputation right now? What do you guys think?
I don't think it would. I don't think it would make would register on the gamer map at this point. I think there's too many other things that, unlike our review of Catan, I think Catan has some je ne sais quoi that makes it work really well. I still think Catan is a great game even today.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Carcassonne does the same thing. I don't think it has the same quality. I think there's too many other things that do it a little bit better, and and it's not engaging to me.
Okay.
I think I'm sure I'm sure there's prototypes before Carcassonne, but I think what made Carcassonne such a big deal was it's one of the first tile placement games, and that mechanism is actually pretty interesting. And I still think Carcassonne does it amongst the simplest. There's others I think that could take the place of Carcassonne, that could fill that niche nowadays. But I think when it first came out, I'm sure it felt pretty innovative to a lot of people, that tile place. And some people love that puzzle of how you place your tiles, building up things as you go. Personally, I think something like King Domino would probably fill that nowadays. But yeah, I don't think it's to a degree. Yeah, to a degree.
It's more complicated than definitely than Carcassonne, but if you're into tile placement.
So then let's segue from that. Then let's get into a little bit of talking about some of the mechanics. So you mentioned tile placement. You also, or tile placement, and then it sounds like worker placement as well. Is that correct?
Yeah,
I wouldn't call it worker placement.
It's not a worker placement game. That's true. It's
you don't place workers.
You do place workers, but it's not the type of game that is a worker placement game.
Okay, so maybe one of you can do a little dive here and explain to me the difference, the differentiation that you're making.
Go, Greg.
Worker placement is essentially a variation on action drafting, where there's an action that I can do. I'll take this action, and now no one else at the table can take that action. Worker placement is specifically I'm taking a worker and placing it on that action and then doing that action. That doesn't happen in Carcassonne. You're taking a meeple, which, by the way, Carcassonne pretty much popularized.
Did it come up with that? Oh, okay.
No, Carcassonne did not come up with the word meeple, but that's actually an interesting story. You have to go on to Board Game Geek about that. But it's definitely it might have popularized that shape, and then therefore popularized the term meeple. But anyways, Carcassonne, you're not putting a worker down and then taking that action. It's more of an area of majority game, maybe, or area influence, which is very different than a worker placement.
Yeah, worker placement is about how you get your actions. So, like, what action am I able to take this round? Can I get if I get my worker on this tile, then I'll be able to do a particular action, and that will generate something or create something I can do elsewhere.
So you don't use workers to select actions?
No.
No,
you use workers to spread your influence on the board, which is different. Yeah.
Okay. So in a way, I mean, I guess you could call them workers, but
they are. And
it's a valid point. I mean, I don't really know. I don't think that there's a specific word for the type of. I don't know. It probably is, but I know that it's not a worker placement game in the meaning of that term, but I don't know if there's an alternative that Carcassonne fits into perfectly.
Yeah, it's just area majority. That's what I call it, or area influence, or something like that. I mean, obviously, if you get too into the nitty gritty of game mechanisms, there's going to be those blurry lines between them. But it's definitely not worker placement. It has a very specific meaning.
So, all right. So, not a worker placement, an area control game. So, let's talk about the mechanics.
I would say area influence.
Area influence.
Again, because area control is very specific. So it's not that kind of game. It's something else. Okay.
So you can't control the areas. You certainly can't work in them, but you can influence them.
This is a road I'm not sure we want to go down, to be honest with you. It is a tile placement game.
It's a tile placement game.
Let's leave it at that.
The purpose of the workers is point generation.
Okay.
And some of that point generation comes later in the game, and some comes right away. And but that's how you get your points from placing workers. You don't take actions by placing workers. That's the key. I think that's the difference that between a worker placement game. You don't get your point generation doesn't come from placing workers usually. Your actions come from placing workers. In this game, your points come from placing workers.
All right.
Or
So
meeples, I should say. Meeples, not workers.
right. So okay, well, so let's talk then about what are so again, from the perspective of if someone was coming into this completely fresh, just looking at the basic rules of the game, and again, we're not providing a in-depth or deep strategy here, but just based on the mechanics that, as you understand them when you first begin play, what in you guys' opinion would be some interesting things to focus on, some interesting ideas to try out? Why don't Eric? Why don't you take this one first?
Well, kind of segueing from what we were talking about, kind of trying to define the game. I think there's a nice segue from that conversation to the conversation about strategy. Because, in my opinion, Carcassonne is kind of a push your luck game. It's a little bit of a like a wagering game, because where you place your workers, you could get well, you only have, how many workers do you start with, Greg?
Like
12,
I
10?
forgot 7, maybe. I forgot.
No, it's an even number, I'm pretty sure.
Is it? I don't remember.
Anyway, you start with a fairly limited number of workers, and you can do 4 things with those workers. But your worker only comes back to you once they've finished collecting points for you. So take, for example, maybe you want to make your worker, I keep saying worker, maybe you want to take your meeple and you want to turn it into a robber. It's going to steal from people on the road. You put it on the road part of the tile that you just placed. Now that worker, that meeple, won't come off that tile until that road is completed, until it has 2 endpoints. So you can continue to make that road longer and longer and longer. When it finally does get completed, you're going to get 10 points or whatever for it. But if the road never gets completed, you'll get significantly less points. The other thing is that your meeple is going to be tied up that entire time. So you've basically placed a meeple on the board that's doing nothing for you right now, other than hopefully making you points later in the game. And that, at least, is an interesting aspect of the game. You can place them within cities, hoping to complete the city. You can place them on a road, hoping to complete the road. You can place them in a monastery, in a church, basically, hoping to surround the church completely, so that you get, it's always a static 9 points, I think, for that one. Or you can place it as a farmer. That's the hardest part of the game, is farmers. Farmers they take a little bit of kind of abstract thinking, but that's where the real big points are, is farmers. You want your farmers to have connected fields, so that all the cities that are finished and created connect up to your field that you have a farmer in, because then the story is that your farmer is feeding those cities and making points, making money.
Okay, so it sounds a little point salad-y then. Is that
with these
correct?
terms, don't pull out these terms.
If we're trying to define things, so yeah.
Yeah.
It is not. No, I would not call it a point
No,
salad.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a tile placement game.
It's a tile placement game. Yes.
Sure.
And by the way, you start with 7 meeples.
7? You were right.
Don't question
Man,
me.
don't question Greg. Okay.
All right. So okay. So anyway, but then a bunch of different ways that you can invest your meeples to get differing potential returns. Then, what I guess maybe you could tell us in your game, Eric, what was your thought going into that game, or what strategy did you try?
Well, I tried the farmer strategy, and because Greg was not focusing on farmers at all, and in the end he beat me by 2 points.
Okay.
So
well, let's stop talking to you and talk to Greg.
Maybe you should talk to Greg.
Yeah. Greg, what do you think about going into the game?
I'm not very good at this game, which is evidenced by the fact that I only beat Eric by 2 points.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks.
But yeah, I don't really have a strong idea of strategy, other than I can talk about how the game feels to me, and I think there's definitely a balance between how many meeples you have on the board. I think Eric was talking about it feels a little push your luckish, and I think it can, because You never want to run completely out of meeples.
Mhm.
I think that's bad news. You don't want to place your last meeple ever.
Why not?
Because then if a good scoring opportunity comes up, you don't have a meeple to place. I think it's kind of like a general rule with Carcassonne that you shouldn't put your last meeple down unless one of them is going to return that same turn. It leaves opportunities open. But at the same time, if you're too conservative, you don't want to just put one meeple out there because then they're just sitting on your board. They can't score you points just sitting on your board. So there's that fine balance between how I put this tile down. Is this risk worth me putting this meeple on? How because sometimes you put a tile down and it's like, okay, I can put a meeple here and it'll come back easily. This is an easy feature to finish because you're
Or even that turn. It'll
yeah, or
come
even
back
that turn. You could put like a little simple tile down that finishes the city that turn, put your meeple on it, and get it back, get points. That would be kind of a conservative way to play. Or you can go for like these big features and hope that you can finish them before the end of the game. So that's, I think, where the balance is learning how to manage your meeples and when you put them on the board and when you don't. And that's an interesting dynamic, I think, because some people are going to be more aggressive about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they might risk too much, and some people might be too conservative and not score enough. But I think farmers, which is why I think this is a little annoying that they turned this into a variant in the newest rulebook, is by far the most interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because that's where a lot of the conflict with other players is going to come from. You can conflict on the roads and the cities, but I feel it's a little indirect.
Mm-hmm.
It takes some setup to get to the point where you can actually take points away from people on that. But the farmers are always contested the whole game. However, the farmers never come back. If you put a farmer down, it's going to be worth a lot of points, but it's not coming back to the end of the game. So anyways, that whole risk management to me is the main feel of the game.
And I do think you need to, it's rare that you're going to win the game without using farmers. Farmers are the biggest point generators, and you need to know how they work in the game.
So, with Catan last week, we talked a lot about I know, Greg, you made the point that with Catan last time that you respond to what the board gives you. Is this game set up in a way to where it's a similar type of thing, or is the only thing to respond to the actions of the other players?
I think you have to respond to the tiles you draw.
Okay.
So in a way, but it's different. It's a lot more tactical than Catan, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
You draw one tile at the beginning of your turn. You should draw the tile at the end of your turn. But you draw one tile at the beginning of your turn. And then you have plenty of options where that goes. So I think that's what you're responding to mostly, that input from the tile draw.
Mm-hmm.
Other players are a factor, especially in the farmer wars.
Mm-hmm.
But you can play this pretty solitaire-ish if you want.
Mm-hmm.
You could just kind of focus on your own stuff. Or you could be, the players could be more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the players you're playing with.
Okay.
So the reason I say that about farmers, if somebody puts down farmers and the person doesn't have some way to contest that, the farmers generate so many points. They generate a number of points per tile that contains a completed city segment, and the fields connect everything. So there is an interesting bit of strategy. There's a puzzle to it. In my opinion, this is like a puzzle game.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a shared puzzle game because you want to connect fields. You want to play your farmers in such a way that it's going to give you a bunch of points at the end of the game. And to do that well, it's about making sure that fields connect in ways that are advantageous to you. And in the game that Greg and I played, for instance, there was a big, like one big connected field for the whole board.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a worker, he had a farmer that wasn't connected to anything. But if he got the right tile, he could connect it back and he would have more farmers than I had, and then he would get the points. So trying to place tiles in a way that makes it hard for him to do that, that's part of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And then alternatively, placing tiles in such a way where you can easily add farmers to a field, where you can kind of have a space in backup where you can, like, hopefully, if Greg managed to get another farmer in there, that I could swing in with one last minute. So there's stuff like that that is interesting. So I don't know. I guess we're getting into how we feel about it, but
yeah. Well, let's kind of then talk about looking at the game. Then let's first of all ask you both. Eric, we'll start with you. What are the pros? What does it do right?
What does it do right? I like the time of the game. I like the speed of the game, and I think that for puzzliness, I think there's a neat little puzzle to be solved. I think that's what it does right. There is some tension when it comes to the farmers, especially. If there wasn't farmers in the game, this game would be, no, I wouldn't care about it one bit.
Okay. All right. What about? Well, we'll go to Greg. What do you think it does right?
I think to me, the number one biggest feature of Carcassonne is at the end of the game, you have together built up this big map on the board. And I think there's a very satisfying feeling to that.
Have we traded spots here, Greg? I'm the guy who cares about aesthetics, okay? Stick to your wheelhouse, okay?
Well, I'm trying to find good things. So, no, it's not a bad game. But for me, I think, and this is me also thinking other people's perspectives too, I don't know if I get as much satisfaction from that as I've seen other people. But there is something appealing to that. You know, you get done and there's this huge map that wasn't there when you started together through competitive play, which also swings back to another big positive of Carcassonne is it requires like zero setup. You put one tile in the middle, you give everyone their 7 meeples, and you start playing. That's
or 10,
it.
Or 10 if you're playing one of the expansions, I'm sure.
That's nice.
It seems like it's a low weight game, right?
Yes, it's a low weight game. It's easy to teach people. Again, the theme it's irrelevant. I mean, anyone can play this. I think the strategy within it is there's some there if you really want to dive into it. But if you're just like looking for a game that you can just casually pass the time, especially 2-player, I think this game is by far best at 2-player. It's a quick game.
Yeah.
You play.
How long was your game?
Down.
Less than an hour.
45 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were playing slow.
Yeah, if you're really going at it, I mean, it's a half-hour game at 2-player. I don't like it at the higher player count. For me, this is pretty much a 2-player game, in my opinion. Yeah, and it's got a nice cadence to it when you play 2-player that I enjoy.
Okay.
I think this is a great game for some people. Maybe this is getting into the cons for me.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? What are the cons? Get into the cons.
I am kind of bored by this game, honestly. It's if you like Sudoku or crossword puzzles, and you want to do that across the table from someone else, then this is a game for you. Like it's that level of, I got to think about this. I got to figure this out a little bit. But honestly, in the game that Greg and I played, we barely spoke to each other. You know, we're sitting across the table, and I'm just like looking at my tile, and I'm like, okay, now it's time. I felt no interaction. I got no excitement from the game. I would get even less if there weren't farmers in the game. But like at the very, very end, I'm like, okay, I think there was a slight like ramping up of excitement near the end of the game because I was trying to pull something off with the farmers, and it didn't quite work. You know, the scoring, basically, that's the exciting part of the game. The rest of it is just like, okay, where is the best place that I can put my tile? Do I have a meeple to spare? No. Okay. So it's that level of engagement. It's like an activity at this point. It's not really, it is a game. Don't get me wrong. It is a game, but it feels like an activity to me.
Feels like an onerous activity. Okay, Greg, what about you? What do you think it did not do well?
I don't think I dislike it as much as Eric seems to, but it's I'm not a person who seeks out expansions normally. I like playing the base game for as long as I possibly can, and I will only consider getting expansion if I really like the game and I feel like I've burned out and I need something fresh. Carcassonne is one of the few games that I feel like I want an expansion right at the beginning. And I have not played an expansion for Carcassonne, but I want to try it with some of the expansions because I feel like it's just there's just not enough there. I agree that the farmers are the most interesting part of the game. There's a lot of interaction there, which is funny that they pulled that out. I still don't understand why they make that a variant. But yeah, if some of the
can you speak to any of the variations? Do you know anything about those?
Well, I mean, what comes in
why they might have done what they did, or
no, I mean, well, I know why they did, and this is kind of another slight negative. It is easy game to teach, but I think farms are difficult to teach properly. And I've seen a lot of newer players take a while to get their mind wrapped around what farmers do, because the way farms connect it's a little weird. And if you're not used to gaming too much, it can be an overload. So I think they took it out and made it a variant because, like, look, just play with these 3 very simple types of meeples. And then when you get used to it, try adding the farmers. I'm pretty sure that's why they did it, to make it even more accessible, because farmers take a while to get your head wrapped around. But yeah, if some of the expansions add more farmer-like tension to the game, I would be willing to try it again. But as it currently stands, it's just not enough meat there for me.
It's an activity.
No, that is a loaded term. Activity is a loaded term. That is not an activity. It's not. It's a game.
All right.
It's 2-player Sudoku. If you enjoy that kind of thing,
I don't agree with that. However, I want to bring up something because Eric said this at the end of our game, and I was thinking about it, and I was ready to fight him on it.
Okay, go fight.
Eric, you said that you thought Carcassonne had more luck in it than Catan. Do you agree with that statement?
I don't remember saying that it had more luck in it. Did I say that?
Oh,
if I had said that, I would have been wrong.
Okay.
So I didn't say that.
But
it does have a lot of luck.
It does, but this is an interesting point. Because I've been thinking about it over the week, I want to bring this up actually. I think Carcassonne has seemingly a lot of randomness if you're not good at the game. and the reason why it reminds me of, and I know we're trying to only reference games that we've talked about in the series, but it really does kind of remind me of a Kingdom Builder, which also has that accusation thrown at it that sometimes it's similar. You draw 1 card and you do something with it, and people say, well, it's the randomness of the draw. But I think with Carcassonne, I think when people say that, it's because they set themselves up in a position where they need 1 tile. And if they have this 1 tile, they can complete this city here and this road here, and then they'll score a ton of points. And then they never get that tile, and they go, oh, well, randomness messed me up there. But I think the trick to Carcassonne is you want to build up your stuff in a way that many tiles can help you out. Like, you're the one that set yourself up to be in the position that you need 1 tile. That wasn't randomness. That was you putting yourself in that position. So
that's also the other player, though. Like, I intentionally in our game, I intentionally put a tile next to a blank space that you needed to connect to a field that we were contested, so that it would be harder for you, because I know that there's a spread of different types of tiles in the game, and I know, Greg, you mentioned that, like, Carcassonne sharks, they're counting tiles, basically. They know what's left in the deck.
Yeah, but that would be player interaction. Yeah, player interaction. That's not randomness, right?
Well, no, I mean, I'm agreeing with you in a sense that you can't say, like, oh, this messed me up. I know, because yes, if this was just a solo game, then it's your fault that you didn't put the tiles out correctly. But you can't always blame that in a competitive. You can't always say that in a competitive game, because if your opponent will oftentimes try to block you from an optimal placement, which is kind of a cool part of the game.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I like that part of the game. And I had one other thing.
There is randomness, though. There is randomness.
There is some.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I like, and I don't think that it's the same quality of randomness as the dice shutting you out in Catan.
So I think it's different, because in Catan, they're very clear about their probabilities. They put dots on the numbers in case you don't know how dice work.
Right.
It's like, 8 has more dots than 12, therefore it's a better tile. But Carcassonne, I feel it's more opaque. where the randomness comes from, the probabilities of things coming out. And actually, that's the other point I wanted to talk about was, if I were to get seriously into Carcassonne and I said, you know what, I'm going to sit down and enjoy this game, I personally would want to play with a tile manifest, which I don't think this game warrants that kind of seriousness. But I would want to have, I want to know what tiles are in, what can come up. Because sometimes I'll put a tile down, I'm like, man, how many of these city end caps are there in that deck left?
Right.
And if I don't know, I don't know. So if I had, then I think that's why I like playing on the app, because the app, you can look that up at any time.
Yeah.
But I think Carcassonne Sharks, people who play this a lot, have that memorized. So, but I think I could enjoy it more if I had access to that information.
I like playing Carcassonne, but I like playing it on my phone.
Yeah.
There's an interesting
What's the
comparison
difference?
there. Well, the difference is that it feels like I can do that. I don't have to sit with someone across the table from them and interact with them in a way that makes me feel like I'm just playing solitaire. You know, I'm being overly harsh on this game, and I don't mean that. I don't mean it to come off that way. It isn't enjoyable. There's some interesting aspects of the game, but I just don't. I find that it does the same. It's the same level of interest as like an app, a web game, you know, or on my phone, something I can just kind of blow a few minutes on. That's what it feels like, except it takes 45 minutes, and there's setup. I mean, so but there is the randomness is an interesting thing to talk about, though, because there's you're right. The randomness that comes from the tiles can be mitigated by good placement. You can't do that with the dice in Catan. But something about Catan makes me feel like it's more like you can sit down and play, and you don't need to. There's a lot more explanation up front for Carcassonne than there is for Catan. For Catan, you can, like, the thing I liked so much about it last week, talking about it, was you can sit around with a bunch of people, various ages, and you can all have a good time. I don't feel like you're going to get the same kind of quality from Carcassonne.
It's definitely, Catan's definitely much more interactive. I agree.
Well, it seems like, sort of then a recurring thing in both of these games, though, is again the need to position yourself in such a way as to be flexible to what comes out. The flexibility is not ever really going to be a bad idea, as opposed to overly, like the situation you're describing, wherein I've got this big thing built and I need one piece. That's like a fairly strong commitment to a singular vision for how the game is gonna go. And it seems like doing that, committing to singular visions for how I must win this game, is really a way to set yourself up to failure, as opposed to I'm going to try to play, loose and be fairly open, and then when I do that, anything that comes along, I'll probably be able to benefit in some way from it, as opposed to a lot of stuff that's, either everything is either 100% useless, or it's the thing that just makes all the dominoes fall and completely wins me the game, but is much lower probability.
Yeah, and I think my point with that is, with the Carcassonne, it's a lot more opaque than it is Catan. And if your brain never makes that click over about how you need to mitigate risk in Carcassonne, you're not going to have a good time with it.
Yeah.
Whereas Catan is very obvious. Yeah, that's the puzzle.
And so, like, if you like solving puzzles, Carcassonne is a great game to get, because you're going to be able to have a new puzzle each time you play. Whereas Catan, you're going to be sitting playing a game with people across the table from you. You're not playing the board as much as you're playing people, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've never liked that in games where you're just sort of sitting there. A lot of games are like that, where you're basically just playing like competitive solitaire, right, across from each other. But it brings up sort of an interesting question to me, which is, how much credit or slack should you give a game for you not being familiar with it? Like, how much, this is obviously a preference, just a preference question. But, if you played Carcassonne 1,000 times and you did memorize all of those tiles, the types of strategy and the level of enjoyment that you would get out of it would obviously change. is that opaqueness that you're referring to in the randomness, is that something that should have been fixed so that from the beginning you have a better chance, or do you think it's legitimate to say, yeah, you're not going to know that, and it is going to feel random at first, but we want you to play this game 20, 30, 40 times, and as you do, that feature will go away? What do you guys think?
Well, I don't want to overstate how much opaqueness there is in Carcassonne. It's still a very light game. I just think it is a little more opaque in how to handle risk mitigation in the beginning. But I guess that's a similar question to pretty much any game that has cards.
Right.
You know, as you know what's in the deck, you're going to get better at it. That's just part of getting familiar with the game. I enjoy that in a game. I like opaque games. If I sit down a game and I it's all very clear to me from the beginning, I'm going to get bored. So I don't mind learning, and that's why I say if Carcassonne was maybe a little heavier,
right?
That's how I would proceed. I would proceed in trying to learn the tile manifest. I think that would be an interesting thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the that is what I mean, I guess, when I'm talking about it being a puzzle. It's the puzzle of eventually learning what's in what the tiles are, what the randomness looks like, and learning how to mitigate that and turn that to your advantage. There's something there. There's definitely something there to find fun in. It's just I prefer games with more people interaction as opposed to puzzle interaction.
Okay. All right. Well, so then any final thoughts on Carcassonne? Would you recommend it, or I guess who would you recommend it to? Would you buy it? Anything else you haven't said about this game that you want to say, Greg?
I like it okay. Actually, I like it less than Catan. Actually, I gave Catan a 7. I would give Carcassonne a 6. I think, which is around my area of I'll play it if that's what the group wants, but I'm not going to be overly enthused about it. And I think it's mostly because, I think there is some player interaction in Carcassonne especially if you play with aggressive people. But I agree, I like a little bit more, and the farmer battles are by far the most interesting. And also, it's just not meaty enough, I don't think. So for me, 6 is where I'm at on it. Maybe with expansions that could go higher, but yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I'm very curious about the expansions. We might be getting to some of those in later episodes, and I'm curious to revisit Carcassonne with different stuff in them. But this game is good for somebody. I have owned this game. I don't own it anymore, and I wouldn't buy it again. But this game would be great for somebody who enjoys that puzzly kind of style. I wouldn't play it with more than 2 people though, because it would be like waiting 10 minutes to put your one number in a Sudoku box. You know, like the speed of a 2-player game is where the game shines the best.
That was a point we missed with our Catan review, actually, that I wanted to talk about. In between player turns, you're more invested, I think, in people's turns, because you're curious what the dice are going to roll. You're curious about the trading aspect. But in Carcassonne, the reason why I say you can draw your tile at the end of your turn is because you're not interacting at all with the players during their turn. So the more players you add, the longer you're waiting to actually be able to do something.
Except you do need to pay attention to where people are placing their farmers.
Yes. Yeah.
And
there's no decisions to be made.
No, there's no decisions to be made, but you do need to keep track of that information.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, as you know, we have our shelf with 10 games that'll hold 10 games. Right now, we've got only 1 game on it, Catan. So Carcassonne will be game number 2. As it fills up, it sounds like once we get to game number 11, that maybe Carcassonne has a fairly good chance of.
You haven't seen the games to come.
Yeah. So so we'll see as we stick around what makes the cut. What are we going to do next, guys? I know we talked about Pandemic last week. Is that what you guys are thinking will be?
Pandemic is next. It's on my shelf right behind me.
Yep.
So, okay,
yeah.
Pandemic
Classic
is
Pandemic.
Classic.
I have the old wooden cube
me
one,
too.
actually.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, Pandemic is one of the games I actually do own, so I may remember some of
In
the
case
things.
the viewers are
probably.
not aware about our situation here, Micah is not really a gamer so much, and we're explaining the game to him. I don't know if that was clarified in the beginning.
Yeah, it will become clear. It will become clear.
It should be clear already, but let me just vocalize it.
Yeah. You don't want me influencing your cred. I understand. So okay.
This
All
is
right.
why we're
Well,
doing a video conference. I don't want to touch Micah and get his normal
It's-
his non-gaming cooties. So I insist on doing this through Zoom.
yeah. That was the arrangement. So okay, cool. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank Greg and Eric for helping us out with Carcassonne, and join us next time. We'll take a look at Pandemic. Until then, stay tuned, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe.
Piece of the action.
Piece of the action. Okay.